your materials. This is the How to Train the Next Generation of Data Scientists and Informaticists group.
Okay, seems appropriate that I should be the person. All right, so we had a really great discussion in our group and a good mix of quote unquote data scientists and clinicians. So we identified some main themes of problems. So one is having the resources and the leadership support. So yes, you might have an interested fellow, for example, but do they have the support to have a period of time to meaningfully engage with a project, and do you have leadership support from the top to fund all of these things within your organization? We talked about a lack of curriculum. We initially said definitions. We got rid of that because we thought that was sort of constraining, and really just saying that we don't have a good core curriculum for what should be required or what might be useful. We talked about the need for curriculum across the continuum, so not just at one point in time, but really from the student to all the way to the professional, whatever your profession might be. We talked about time constraints. I think that that's present for all of us, but really the practicalities and how someone's going to devote time to this sort of thing. So this came up especially when we talked about how do we train data scientists, computer science people, informatics, how do we train those learners alongside clinicians, and when do you actually put them together? How do you find a week or 2 weeks for them to go into a boot camp together, and learn from each other, and the realistic hurdles and logistic hurdles of that? Although we did hear about some successes in that realm as well. We talked about a lack of clear expectations, like what does it mean to be a data scientist, and what should that actually look like, and what do you need to know to be able to call yourself that? And then we talked about recruitment, just that if you're not sort of already in the know, then this is a field you might actually not get exposed to. And so how do we recruit like young, bright minds to chase these sorts of problems? Okay. Sorry, I've totally covered all of the things up here, but okay. So then we talked about some solutions. So one, we said maybe outreach and recruitment strategies. So we talked about the idea of a hackathon and specifically trying to bring together people maybe in like randomized teams by specialty, so that people who really have no idea how to approach this and people with actual coding expertise would be part of a team and could see how each person approaches a problem. We talked about the need for cross-pollination between specialties, and how that creates a richer team and more effective team of clinicians and scientists together. Another solution we came up with was a centralized organization. So an organization that was well poised to bring together curricular resources, to facilitate mentorship, help mentees find both local and national mentorship and what that should look like. And then we talked about, as a third solution, a list of sort of core competencies, not to be prescriptive, but to sort of, for the person who's new to this, like you don't know what you don't know. And so here's the list of things we might suggest. And not just like these are the things that you should really be aware of, but also resources for how to go about gaining those competencies, where to look if you're not sure. We talked about that some of those resources would be great if they were joint programs, with people across specialties and disciplines, and then maybe a list of courses or types of courses that could be useful for people building like a career development proposal, like what should be in there. I think a lot of us at this stage in our career have those questions, and it's really, you could ask 20 people and get 20 answers. So I specifically wanted to know that. And then we had this nice sort of idea that I drew, which was wonderful, as like this central organization that could maybe help to facilitate some of these things. So we were calling it the PDCU, but you could say PEDAL or whatever organization that might bring these things together and help to facilitate this. And I think that's sort of why we're all here, is how do we move these things forward? So we talked about bringing in, leveraging existing organizations and existing resources. So the CDC and NIH have already some pieces of this. You could bring together certification organizations and joint programs for that. Industry pipeline, so how can we partner with industries that already know how to train effective data science teams and not reinvent the wheel, but work, maybe partner with them to see what they do well. and how that might apply to us. And then getting back at the outreach and recruitment, the STEM pipeline. So how could you start to create educational resources for educators who want to get their students engaged in this field? So the idea of like a high schooler could maybe work on some sort of project with this de-identified data, and what a meaningful experience that might be for somebody who's really trying to decide what they want to do with their life. So yeah, that's what we came up with. Does anybody from our group have things to add that I missed out on? Or questions or comments from the group? Oh yeah, it was brought up multiple times that one of the challenges to making all of these things happen, finding time and funding, is also having leaders at the organizational level, and then also of the governing bodies, that think this is important and that prioritize this work. And that, for one person to try and find time for themselves is one thing, but if we can, as a group, advocate for that with hospital leadership or organizational leadership, then this can all be more effective, rather than it being on that individual person.
So maybe a question for the group, because a lot of what you focused on was sort of the pipeline and the people who are sort of identified or being tapped to work in the sort of data science space. And I guess that was leading because of the name of the group. It's like, how do we train the next generation of data scientists? But I'm thinking a little bit broader of how do we create that data science literacy that we need in healthcare, particularly going back to Mike Dean's initial imperative focus on how do we get people to understand the perils of something like ChatGPT, but also even for non-data scientists to read clinical papers on data models and know how to interpret those, even if that's not their primary focus of the research. Like, did you guys talk at all about that? Or?
We sort of we talked about that. We might talk about that, and then we decided all of the stickies that went up were based on these sorts of problems, and we focused on this one large thing instead.
I'm going to take a mic privilege briefly. As you talked about the pipeline, did you talk about, and maybe we were pretty far down the stream in that pipeline, but did you talk about the diversification of that pipeline at all?
That's a great question, and we did not, and I don't think really to talk about that. That's a great
This may
point.
already exist, but is there an opportunity to link learning about data science through VPS with the MOC quality requirements, and kind of coming at quality from a big data kind of using that requirement that we all have to start this, to improve data science literacy. I just don't know what it looks like, or maybe it already exists.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I like that, but I feel like a lot of these efforts are going to be self-selective to the people that already have an interest. And I'm thinking a little further back, and I'm sort of I put my program director hat on, and I think about I'm getting pulled in 15 different directions in terms of what I'm mandated to make sure that my fellows are exposed to, and that it increases each year. And it sounds like almost the ACGME needs to think about this as how this fits in with some of the core competencies, and I think this needs to be maybe a little bit more at the institutional level. I guess I have a question for the data scientists in the room, because this is something as a clinician or as a clinician researcher I think about. What brought you into doing data science in healthcare? Because my sense is you could go work at Amazon and make a crap ton more money. And that to me is one of the interesting. How do we? It gets back to the recruitment thing. I know I work for a state university. I know what my data scientist, what the maximum she's ever going to make, and I'm sure she could make more if she left. And we lose data scientists every year that go to work in industry. So just a thought. Question.
I've got you on the queue, Kurt.
I feel I can speak to this. It's very hard. Like I said, I saw the train. But I think it's a very, I can speak only for me personally. It was a personal decision to leave this other place where I was working at, and I I enjoyed it and I loved what I did. But then, and the thought of healthcare did not even cross my mind. Like, I've always enjoyed whatever it was that I did. But then this opportunity came along, and initially I was quite skeptical, like, crowdfunded, what doesn't work out? But it was like literally a leap of faith for me. And then realizing, like, wow, this is actually important and meaningful. And again, the other small number of people that I know, it was kind of like that, and it's a very small number, by the way. And it is a reality when we try to hire data scientists. Up front, we say, I cannot pay you, we cannot pay you the way that Google, Netflix, whatever, Amazon will pay you. And that immediately like drops the list down to a really, so it's a challenge. And yeah, how do you reach? I think in my previous company we call them do-gooders. I don't know.
Are do-gooders who chose pediatrics. So, this is a concept that we are familiar with. We do apply at our place, and we explicitly say, let's find do-gooders in this applicant pool. Because those are the people that won't just come, but you have a higher likelihood of.
And that they will actually stay. Yeah, and it's fair.
Yeah, so I graduated about 6 years ago, and I went into the VPICU out of my computer science degree. And so my journey going into this was basically I did a lot of research while I was still in college. And a lot of the research that I was doing was just kind of compartmentalized to academia. And so I had the sense that whatever I was doing was just going to be lost in the academic literature and just never see the light of day outside of maybe supporting somebody's grant funding at some point in time. And so I basically told myself that if I were to go back into this research world, I wanted to do something with people who are actually going to use the results of my work to make a difference in their care. And so I think VPICU basically fit the bill for that. And I knew, like, going into this, I would have a certain salary cap. It's not going to look anything like whatever Fang would give me or anything. But with that being said, I think things that I valued, especially my first 3 years, even up to this point, was the huge amount of mentorship that I received in my program. There are people who took a lot of care to train me in ways like Melissa just stood up over there to talk about the test set and made such emphasis about placing it under lock and key. That's because of me, by the way. I opened the test set a bunch of times. I just want to point it out over there. And then after, yeah. Yeah, and I almost had to go to Amazon after that. It would have been really bad. But yeah, but there was just yeah, I know. If it makes you guys feel any better, we waited for new data to come in before we actually published any results, and then that was actually kept under lock and key from me. Yeah. Yeah, no, she wasn't joking. It was bad. But that being said, I came in green, very green, and a lot of love, care, mentorship was given to me, and that was the one thing that actually kept me in the program for as long as it did. And yeah, so yeah. As long as it has. Anyways, yeah, I'll hand this.
Kurt back here. How many folks in the room with data science research programs have relationships with your university computer science departments? No? No? Yeah? Okay.
I want to concede to.
I just want to, I think we should flip it, almost like a flipped classroom. And so you guys have a data set and expertise that Google and Bing and all the other guys want. So why are we paying them? Why are we trying to get their data scientists to come to us? Why aren't they coming and begging and paying for using this as a co-development? Like the pipeline they have, we were talking in our group about, they have a very concerted pipeline from elementary school up through, the top rungs, but they're not do-gooders. They're not connected to the purpose or the knowledge that you guys have. So why wouldn't they pay to partner with us? And that sort of like the circle that's up there, why aren't we the repository, the go-to people to advance their cause? Because then they're going to want to pay for it rather than us trying to underpay the data scientists that we try to get from them. They're trying to penetrate healthcare right now, right? And and anything else that moves, but go ahead.
Actually, so when I first moved out to Stanford, Google was going department to department asking, how can we help you? The issue is they want fast turnaround, and it's got to be high yield. And critical illness that's going to turn something out for them to be able to put an algorithm that, you know, looks at x-rays and identifies ARDS 5 years from now is way too slow. So if we want to go down that pathway, realize your turnaround time and your proof of and deployment has to be months to a year. So that's why they don't partner with us. It's too slow.
We'll do one more, and then we have to move on to the next group. Randall, start thinking about who your spokesperson is.
Just piggybacking on that, right? Academic industry partnerships in pediatrics in general are sort of really low on the totem pole, and that's why the NIH plays such an enormous role in the development of any pediatric specific devices, for example, right? And I'm doing ECMO. I'm in the cardiovascular device arena. I review a lot of this, and that's where the money comes from. It's always the government. It's extremely rare that any industry partner would actually solidly commit to it until a ready-to-go prototype has been developed with federal funding. So I assume that it's similar when it comes to data science, but
Next group. Okay.